There is a kind of wound that doesn't bleed. It echoes in your choices, in your silence, in the way you flinch at kindness because cruelty wore a smile before. But let me tell you, what tried to break you cannot define you. You are not what happened to you. You are what you choose to become beyond it. You were whole before they walked in. You were light before their shadow ever touched you. What they said, what they did, how they tried to twist your truth, that was never a measure of you. That was a mirror of them. But when someone has the audacity to belittle your spirit while smiling in your face, it can leave behind a silence so loud it echoes through every corner of your self-esteem. Still, hear me well, your worth has never lived in their approval, never breathed in their praise, never depended on their ability to see you clearly. There are people who will look at gold and see rust because their eyes are too used to seeing only what they can control. They will call your boundaries selfish, your voice too loud, your softness weakness, only because none of it bends to their hunger for power. When someone builds their ego by tearing down your essence, it isn't about your lack, it is about their fear. A fear that your strength, your knowing, your brilliance might one day awaken and choose to leave their illusion behind. You were never too much. You were never too intense, too needy, too emotional, too complicated. You were simply too expansive for someone who survives on smallness. And when they couldn't shrink you, they shamed you. When they couldn't possess you, they punished you. But don't you carry their confusion as your inheritance. Don't you swallow their silence and call it truth. Don't you wrap their rejection around your soul like it's the price of love. You must reclaim what was always yours, the right to define your value, the right to say, I am worthy, not because someone stayed, but because you stayed true to yourself. You must gather up the broken pieces they tried to scatter and say, this is still me, I am still here, and I have never been less than whole. You must know that no insult, no manipulation, no withdrawal of affection ever had the power to reduce you. They did not create your light, so they do not get to dim it. They do not write your story, so they do not get to narrate your worth. They do not live your truth, so they cannot name your identity. You were already divine before they doubted you, already chosen before they discarded you, already enough before they ever tried to convince you otherwise. Gaslighting is not just a lie, it is a performance of denial so polished, so persistent, that it makes you question your own reflection. It's a slow erosion of reality, not by accident, but by design. A twisting of truth that leaves you doubting your memories, your instincts, your very sanity. One moment, you're sure of what you saw, what you heard, what you felt, and the next, you're apologizing for being too sensitive, for overreacting, for imagining wounds that bleed right in front of you. This is not love, this is not misunderstanding, this is control wrapped in charm, cruelty hiding behind a calm voice. Gaslighting breaks you quietly. It teaches you not to trust your own voice. It teaches you to seek permission to feel, to second guess the way someone makes you ache, to wonder if your suffering is even real. It is one of the most violent forms of psychological theft, not because it yells, but because it whispers until your inner voice no longer belongs to you. You begin to carry guilt that isn't yours. You defend the very hands that hurt you. You shrink so small just to keep peace that never existed to begin with. But here lies the power of naming. Because what they fear most is not your anger, not even your tears. What they fear is your clarity, your ability to say, this is not confusion, this is manipulation. Your ability to speak what they swore you would never have the strength to utter. To look at the patterns, the denials, the cycles and say, this is abuse. Naming the pain does not make you bitter. It makes you free. It stops the loop of self-blame. It returns the light to the room they tried to darken with doubt. They want you disoriented because people who are lost do not leave. But when you name it out loud, without shame, without flinching, you reclaim your power. When you say, that happened, that was real, that hurt, and it was not my fault, you begin to untangle yourself from the web they spun around your spirit. You no longer soften their cruelty with excuses. You no longer minimize your pain to protect their ego. You give yourself permission to feel, to remember, to heal without begging for their validation. Naming the pain is sacred. It is the moment you become your own witness, your own advocate, your own savior. You stop needing the abuser to confirm the damage. You stop expecting apology from the architect of your confusion. You begin to rise, not because they let you go, but because you chose truth over illusion. You chose your own voice over their version of events. You chose to no longer question yourself every time your heart screams that something is not right. And the truth is, it was never about the volume of your pain. It was about the silence they required to keep it alive. And now that silence is broken. Now the fog begins to clear. Now your healing begins with a name, not their name, but yours. The name of who you are becoming beyond the damage, beyond the doubt, beyond the days you thought you were crazy when really you were being conditioned to forget the sound of your own soul. There's a lie that creeps into the soul like a whisper in the dark. A lie that says you take up too much space, feel too deeply, dream too wildly, want too honestly. A lie that says your voice is too loud, your heart is too open, your questions too relentless. It doesn't come all at once. It comes in sighs, in rolled eyes, in silences that follow your joy, in criticism dressed as care. It comes when your laughter makes someone uncomfortable. It comes when your grief is too inconvenient for their shallow world. And over time, you begin to dim your light to fit into rooms never meant to hold your fire. They told you that you were overwhelming when really you were just overflowing. They said you were complicated, but you were layered with truths they never had the courage to face. You were called intense because you didn't flinch at depth, because you didn't speak in small talk when your soul was made for sacred conversation. You weren't too much. They were just unequipped to meet someone so whole, so vivid, so unafraid to feel the world without filter. You see, people who live in half-light cannot understand those who burn from within. They want neatness, not nuance, obedience, not openness. And when they cannot match your frequency, they try to lower your volume. Not because you are wrong, but because your presence forces them to confront their absence. Your fullness reminds them of what they have muted in themselves. And so they tell you to shrink, to soften your nose and question your yeses, to decorate your silence with smiles and dress your outrage in politeness. They make your tears a burden, your clarity a threat. But know this, just because they could not carry you does not mean you were too heavy. Just because they walked away does not mean you were unworthy of staying for. Just because they chose smallness does not mean you were too grand. There are people who will call your authenticity drama, your dreams delusion, your passion aggression, only because your truth disrupts their comfort. Do not fold yourself into pieces for people who never intended to build a life with the real you. Do not apologize for being the whole sky in a world that is satisfied with ceilings. You are not too much. You are simply not meant for places, people, or patterns that require you to be less than who you are. Your sensitivity is not weakness, it is sacred intuition. Your passion is not noise, it is purpose with a pulse. Your depth is not danger, it is divine design. You do not need to apologize for the way your soul was made. You are not a problem to solve, you are a presence to be honored. You are not a fire to extinguish, you are a sun to rise on your own terms. You don't have to keep proving you're worthy of being seen, heard, or held. You are not too much for the right hands, the right hearts, the right spaces that honor what you bring without asking you to bring less. You are not a mistake to edit. You are a masterpiece in motion. And the people who cannot see that were never meant to walk beside your light in the first place. There comes a point in your life when you realize that survival is no longer enough. That merely existing, making it through the day, silencing your truth just to keep the peace, bending your spirit just to fit into someone else's frame, that is not living. That is not what you were born for. You were not put on this earth to bow forever beneath the weight of your wounds. You were not designed to live on the edge of your own life, tending to everyone else's needs while neglecting your own sacred center. Survival taught you how to stay, but sovereignty teaches you how to rise. Survival was about doing what you had to, becoming what was necessary just to get by. You put on the mask. You smiled through the pain. You played roles written by people who never understood your soul. You became adaptable and resilient and silent. You learned how to read the room before you read your own heart. You made yourself small in places that couldn't handle your truth, thinking that safety came from invisibility. But a time comes when you must stop surviving the past and start reigning in the present. You must gather the pieces of yourself scattered by trauma, rejection, betrayal, and fear and call them home. You must reclaim your inner court, that sacred throne inside you where your intuition, your values, your power, your truth sit in council, where no one's voice is louder than your own, where your worth is no longer up for debate, where your boundaries are not requests but declarations, where you do not ask for permission to exist as you are, to feel what you feel, to want what you want. To move from survival to sovereignty is to declare yourself the ruler of your internal world. It means you no longer wait for validation from the same people who benefit from your silence. It means you stop explaining your pain to those who delight in misunderstanding you. It means you rise from the ruins not to prove anything, but because it is your birthright to be whole. It is your divine duty to protect your peace, to crown your own heart with worthiness, to sit in stillness and say, I choose me. Sovereignty is not loud, but it is undeniable. It is not the absence of pain. It is the refusal to be defined by it. It is the quiet power of knowing who you are, even when the world forgets. It is the sacred act of no longer chasing love that costs you your self-respect. It is the strength to walk away from the table when your soul is no longer fed. It is the grace to forgive without returning to what broke you. It is the courage to rebuild brick by brick, not just a life that looks good, but a life that feels like truth. You do not owe anyone an explanation for your healing, your growth, your awakening. The throne was always yours. You just had to stop asking for a seat at tables built to keep you kneeling. You just had to remember that you are not what happened to you. You are what you rise into when you stop merely surviving and start reigning over your life with intention, with clarity, with sacred authority that cannot be shaken, not even by the memory of all the times you were made to feel unworthy of your own crown. There is a silence that is not surrender but sovereignty, a stillness not born of weakness but of wisdom. In a world that demands noise as proof of strength, there is something profoundly royal about choosing not to speak when provoked, not to engage when misunderstood, not to fight for space in places that diminish your value. The world may call it defeat, but only because it does not understand the elegance of restraint, the poise of self-possession, the holy armor of peace that needs no performance to be powerful. Silence, when chosen from a place of clarity, is not the absence of voice. It is the presence of control. It is the understanding that not every fire deserves your oxygen, that not every insult deserves a reply, that there is more dignity in your composure than in 100 well-crafted comebacks. It is the sacred discipline of not allowing anyone else to set the tone of your spirit. When you are silent, not out of fear, but out of knowledge of your own worth, you wear your boundaries like velvet and your grace like gold. You see, people will test you. They will mistake your silence for submission, your calm for consent, your quiet for emptiness. But silence is not where you are less. It is where you are most. It is where you reclaim your breath, where you commune with your inner court, where you rise above the noise to a place they cannot follow. Because some wars are not worthy of your spirit. Some battles are not meant to be fought in the mud of misunderstanding. Some responses are not owed. And some moments call for the majesty of walking away, not the chaos of staying to be heard by ears that are already closed. To be silent is to be sovereign over your energy. It is to understand that power does not always announce itself. It simply is. True strength does not need to shout to be known. It doesn't need to tear others down to feel tall. It knows when to speak and when to leave the space empty, because your peace is too expensive to waste on explanations. You do not have to argue with those determined to misread your soul. You do not need to fight every accusation, correct every assumption, win every room. The crown you wear is unseen, but it is felt. It radiates from the way you carry yourself, from the refusal to let chaos pull you out of character. This silence is not passivity, it is presence. It is the unshakable awareness that you do not owe your story to anyone who would twist it. It is the refusal to water your wisdom down to make others feel more comfortable. It is the profound knowing that what is sacred does not beg to be seen, and what is true does not rush to defend itself. Your silence is not a void, it is a throne. And when you sit in it, unmoved, unapologetic, unwavering, you remind the world that power often arrives not with noise, but with stillness, with steadiness, with the grace to rise while others stumble in search of attention they will never find in your stillness. Healing is not some quiet little process that happens in the background while life continues untouched. Healing is not a delicate unraveling of pain in soft corners, where everything smells like sage and sounds like whispering winds. No, true healing is loud in the soul. It breaks things. It shifts tectonic plates within your spirit. It calls out everything you've buried, every wound you tried to ignore, every piece of yourself you gave away for survival. It brings the truth into the light, even if that truth burns at first. Because healing is not about going back to who you were before the pain. It is about becoming someone forged in the fire of it. You don't just heal, you rise. You rise from the ashes of betrayal and abandonment, from the grief that split you in two, from the words they used to break you, from the silence that followed. You rise from your own self-doubt, your own shame, your own moments of weakness where you gave love hoping it would make you whole. You rise, not with perfect grace, but with sacred defiance, with a body still trembling but a spirit that refuses to be small, with eyes open wide to what hurt you and still choosing to face the sun. You don't just heal, you roar, not always with sound, but with your presence, with your boundaries, with your unapologetic return to yourself. You roar with your refusal to apologize for how long it took, for how messy it looked, for how loud your grief was and how deep your healing had to go. You roar in your no's that once were whispers. You roar in your truth that now stands unshaken. You roar when you say, "This is who I am now," and you do not flinch when someone wishes you were still who they could control. You don't just heal, you rebuild from the ground up. You go back and reclaim the parts of yourself you left behind in places you should have never stayed. You build a home inside your own soul. You put your joy back in the center. You reframe your identity, not around your wounds, but around your wisdom, around what you learned, not just what you lost. You do not rebuild to please. You do not rebuild to impress. You rebuild because the foundation was never meant to hold who you've now become. You rebuild in truth, in purpose, in the image of the person who walked through hell and came out crowned in clarity. You heal, yes, but not into the same version of yourself that was broken. You are not here to return to who you were. You are here to become who you were always meant to be once the pain passed through and the light returned to the bones that were left standing. You are the proof that healing is not passive, it is power, not retreat, it is reclamation.